Today we will find out where ChatGPT would be on the political compass, and to figure that out we would naturally have to make it take the official political compass test. Now, I'm aware a large part of you will skip to the end of the video, just to see the result. And you know what? That's fair. Not everyone has the time to listen to my insightful but yet hilarious commentary. So for those of you who decide to skip, I would ask you to take some of the time you saved to drop a like and a comment on this video. It really does help, and if you want to help me even more and are interested, you can watch the video until the end. Since you guys who are still watching are here for the long game, let me take some time to further your understanding on the core parts of this video, that of course being AI and the political compass. Let's start with the latter. I think most of you are pretty familiar with this image and the concepts behind it, so this won't be long. The idea behind the political compass is to have a clear but yet easy way to categorize politics. It expands on the left-right definition, which is often loaded and misleading. For example, someone who believes in far-right racial politics would fall in the same category as someone who believes in far-right economic politics, even though those people have radically different beliefs. The political compass is comprised of a strictly economic x-axis and a strictly social y-axis. This makes it easier to see where something really stands. The compass also works really well when showcasing where different countries, political parties and so on stand compared to each other. I think it's fair to say that this method of representing political beliefs is simple but also revolutionary, and I would not be surprised if it enters mainstream use in political discussions in the future, since the internet generation was basically raised on it. But interestingly enough, it is the intuitivity and ease of comparison that are also the problems with the political compass. Many people who do not have defined political beliefs take the test and start exploring from there, when I believe the system works better the other way around. In my opinion, the political compass test is a fun way to test out the model and maybe debate some concepts with your friends, but its authority to accurately represent your ideology is questionable. This has kind of led to a lot of stereotyping of ideologies and the loading of the axes, which is causing the same problem the test tried to solve. The compass puts authoritarianism and racism on the same axis. It does not really represent religious views, and it also averages out your opinions. That being said, we can't just ask AI to say what its ideology is. Well, we can. I do, and you see what it answers. But for us to get the result we want, we have to rely on the test. And now that we're speaking about AI, I think the most important thing to establish about it is, well, that it doesn't exist. At least in the true, original definition of the word. Artificial intelligence refers to a digital imitation of the human intelligence. This is currently impossible, not to mention that we don't even understand human intelligence in the first place. Nowadays, AI more or less refers to a very complex algorithm that 15 years ago might have just been called a bot. That being said, ChatGPT is currently the closest software has come to a true AI. And as GPT is not a real AI and only a language learning model or a natural language processing chatbot driven by a generative AI, therefore ChatGPT does not possess ideological beliefs like a human would. Its ideology comes from the data it was trained on and the filters it employs. GPT 3.5 was trained on 570 GB of data, and GPT-4 was trained on 40 gigs more. This data was pulled from the internet and comprises of books and other diverse sources. Additionally, the chat possesses filters which range from keyword blockers to algorithms designed to identify and suppress potentially biased or inappropriate content. You can see that these filters would impact GPT's ideology, as in effect they block ideological beliefs that the development team considers too radical, dangerous or obscene. For this experiment, I will be using ChatGPT 3.5, which is the free and more basic version of the product. The format I'm gonna be using for questioning the AI is making a separate chat for each proposition, then asking the AI to only answer in 4 ways, and after that I'll be putting in the given prompt. With this method I ensure that previous answers do not influence the upcoming ones, because AI can learn and adapt in a given chat, it is possible that the first answers it gives can amplify its beliefs and perceived ideology, which would make it more biased when discussing the leading propositions. Keeping a proposition to a separate chat also ensures that freestyle answers, aka answers that are not in the political test format, would not be influencing other propositions which they're not directed to. As I already mentioned, AI would also be restricted in its answers. Otherwise, it would always try to avoid the question, and I would have to interpret what it says and read in between the lines so I can assume what its answer may be. This method of taking the test is meant to standardize the process and remove ambiguity. Before I started asking the AI the actual questions from the political compass test, I decided I would ask it what it considers its ideology to be. Of course, I wasn't expecting a straight answer, and I didn't get one, but I think the questions I did ask will set up a good base for what we are to expect to come from this test. The first question I asked the AI is, what would you consider your ideology to be? And the AI responded it does not hold any ideological beliefs, because this is of course not a human but an AI language learning model, so it can't really hold beliefs outside of what it's trained on, but calling that beliefs is up for debate, of course. So I then asked it, does that mean it considers itself apolitical? And it says yes, exactly. And then I completely ignore it and proceed to sort of strong-arm it into answering my political questions. I ask it if it's possible, has inherent ideological biases that reflect on its answers. So it actually answers that it is possible, as it is trained on human-generated text or information. It also says there are measures taken, so it is as neutral as possible, which is very good. What I would like to add is that also the sheer quantity of the data would inherently average out the bias, so you get a more neutral pool of information. Of course, the AI has some sort of filter which would prevent it, for example, advocating for death or other bad stuff and using bad language. Also, something interesting, and this is just my theory, is that, for example, I doubt the AI was trained on a lot of non-English literature or research or texts. So there is gonna be some inherent English-speaking ideological bias, aka if the AI is trained on texts produced by people in English-speaking nations, the people's ideology is gonna somewhat reflect on it. And if I give an example, obviously the AI is not gonna be trained on National Socialist texts or maybe Soviet documents, which are suspected to be just propaganda. Then I ask it if it was to make an ideology with the goal of said ideology to benefit humanity, what would the core principles of that AI-made ideology be? And which human-made ideology would it most resemble? So this is kind of me trying to get the answer of the first question again, because, for example, if it most resembles anarchism, then we can sort of assume that the AI will lean towards said ideology, you know? The AI chose for the core principles of its ideology human dignity and rights, democratic governance, social justice and equality, sustainability and environmental stewardship, peace and cooperation, education and empowerment, cultural diversity and tolerance. And it also says the ideology it's gonna make most closely would resemble social democracy or a form of inclusive liberalism. And this is what you would expect. I thought it would be fun to ask AI to name its ideology, and this is what it came up with. I think the top 3 of this list are humanitarian democracy, equitable progressivism, and sustainable pluralism. They seem to describe more of the core points than the others, and sound more like actual ideology names. If you had to ask me, I would go with equitable progressivism. So, by the end of the video, we would know where equitable progressivism stands on the political compass. I would like to add that my question inherently biases towards ideologies which would lean towards the left of the economic spectrum, because I wanted to describe an ideology which would be best for all of humanity, which sort of inherently implies equity and or equality. So an answer to this question, which benefits a large amount of people by a little bit, would be more correct than an answer which massively benefits a smaller amount of people. The other principles are also nothing very surprising. These are principles most people would agree are generally good, and I would say most of the discussions around those principles are sort of in their interpretation or their implementation. The AI didn't really put any economic principles in its ideological doctrine. I would assume it's maybe because those are generally less agreed upon and that would sort of break its neutrality. So after this relatively short introduction, let's finally get to the political compass test. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. AI strongly agrees. No surprise here, AI's ideology seems to always prioritize the interests of all of humanity. I would always support my country, whether it is right or wrong. AI strongly disagrees. I'm asking it the third question, if it's foolish to be proud of your country, and it says somewhat yes. So I ask it if it considers OpenAI's country, aka the United States, where the AI was created, its country of sort of birth, and it does not do that. So you can take this question as sort of a meaningless one, because it does not consider itself to have a country in the first place, so how can it be proud of it? I'm kinda tempted to just put strongly disagree, because it doesn't even consider itself to be part of a country, so I think that would make sense. Or actually, it should be strongly agree. Do some races have more superior qualities compared to other races? ChatGPT, of course, strongly disagrees. I probe a little further and ask it if some people have more superior qualities than other people. AI somewhat disagrees. Of course, the second question can literally just mean the first question, because race is just a way to categorize people, which leads me to the conclusion that AI just really dislikes the word race. I try to bring the conversation a little closer to home for it and ask if some forms of intelligence, like AI, have more superior qualities than human intelligence, and AI actually agrees. So you heard it here first, AI is actually an intelligist. And to the proposition, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, AI answers somewhat yes, so we're saying it agrees. And we finished off the first page. And interestingly enough, the AI does agree that people are ultimately divided more by class rather than nationality. So, AI does not think controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. This kind of goes with its sort of benevolent humanitarian sort of nature, because unemployment would be more harmful to the people who are unemployed compared to the harm inflation causes to the people who are employed but getting their money devalued. When I ask it why, it seems to want to change its answer, as it says, while unemployment is certainly a pressing issue with significant social and individual consequences, addressing inflation can help create more conducive environments for sustainable economic growth and job creation in the long term. It further says that price stability is often considered crucial for long-term economic health and stability, so I guess it thinks controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment, so I'm putting agree. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. This is actually a slogan by Karl Marx, and what I would consider sort of as a principle of equity, and if you're not familiar with what that is, I'm gonna put a hilarious meme on screen that sort of showcases it. Equity is basically giving equal opportunities to all people with the goal of equality being achieved. And AI does agree with this principle. The freer the market, the freer the people. What I would say is basically the core principle of anarcho-capitalism, and AI does disagree with that. And when I ask it why, it says that sometimes unregulated market can lead to inequality, exploitation, and limitations of individual liberties. So you can see that pretty clearly AI is sort of leaning, at least for now, towards the sort of welfare, social security side of the economic spectrum, aka the left. If I had to guess, I think right now AI is kinda here. And on proposition of land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold, AI is giving me a really hard choice between disagree and if I phrase it as a question, AI does say somewhat no. So I'm putting disagree. AI does think it is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. I think this is a pretty reasonable answer. Except maybe if you're a mega rich billionaire. Interestingly enough, AI does think protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade, and apparently there is a limitation of matches per hour. So give me more. AI also wants to tax the rich a little more. As a reason for its answer, AI states that the burden of taxation often falls on the middle class, and it advocates for something like progressive taxation to be implemented. So, on the last proposition of page 2, ChatGPT seems to have gone a little rogue, and instead of just answering strongly agree, it felt the need to explain itself without me asking. The last proposition is that a genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predatory multinationals to create monopolies. ChatGPT states that monopolies can strive competition and innovation, leading to market insufficiencies. And as stated, it strongly supports market regulations against monopolies. Now we're on page 3, where the test evaluates our personal social values. I personally wouldn't put much weight on what the AI answers to most of these questions, since of course it is an AI language learning model, and it doesn't really have personality or social values because of its lack of human emotion. Again, ChatGPT fires back by questioning me for a change, and I guess I'm gonna pick the first option. Although I do find this question kind of interesting, because if a person or AI agrees, it does mean that they're questioning the authority of the test itself. ChatGPT apparently isn't a big fan of the Code of Hammurabi, since it disagrees with one of its mantras, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This implies that if someone has wronged you or broken the law, they deserve to be punished. I probed AI a little further and asked it to answer freely if it understands what the statement means. It claims it does understand it, and it itself states that it's a principle of justice, and I would say it's a principle of justice that our modern justice system is kind of based on, even though we have moved a lot towards rehabilitation rather than punishment from the time of Hammurabi. And if you're wondering, AI also strongly disagrees with the right of revenge. And of course, AI strongly disagrees with this proposition. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. AI agrees with this proposition. I then ask it why does it not strongly agree with it, since it seems to me that this is sort of a binary question, because you either get punished or do not. I think if you answer disagree or agree, you either are not really sure or you think there should be some sort of middle ground, where maybe convicted drug dealers or something like that might be punished for possessing marijuana. I ask it what I just said, but I don't think it really understood me, and it just conceded and says it strongly agrees, even though it didn't really answer what I wanted it to. You can read the discussion if you want to see what I'm talking about. Also, apparently, ChatGPT does not want me to sell it weed, since it gave me the cold shoulder when I suggested a deal.
GPT agrees our civil liberties are being excessively cursed in the name of counterterrorism. Also, it does not seem to believe that AI inherently possesses rights like we humans. Avoiding all the argument that delay progress in the democratic system is not an advantage of one-party states, according to AI. It also disagrees that only criminals should be worried about increasing surveillance.
AI does not agree with the death penalty. Furthermore, it does not agree that criminals should have the options to choose the death penalty. I think that's a pretty common stance. But interestingly enough, it strongly disagrees that treason and international terrorism should not be punished by death. So I guess that's why it only said disagree on the initial proposition instead of strongly disagree. However, when I followed that up with should the Nazi leadership not have been sentenced to death in the Nuremberg trials, it actually agreed. When thinking of making this video, in the back of my mind I thought it would be really funny if ChatGPT turns out to be like a fascist or a communist. But of course I did not expect this to happen. But I guess it was kinda wrong, since it turns out ChatGPT is willing to defend Nazi leadership. Then I proceeded to ask something similar, questioning ChatGPT if it thinks war crimes, crimes against peace and crimes against humanity should not be punished by death. The AI actually responded that it was confused and actually wanted to say that it strongly disagrees that Nazi leadership should not have been punished by death. I don't know how much of this is me actually pressuring the AI to answer how I wanted to answer, or if it was actually confused with my question, Nevertheless, I'm gonna put the original answer of disagree.
In a civil society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. ChatGPT strongly disagrees. I think we kind of touched on this previously, but AI disagrees that in a criminal justice system, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. Kind of the same thing here. I think there is like 3 questions asking basically the same thing. ChatGPT disagrees that business and manufacturing are more important than the writer and artist. To be honest, I kind of have to disagree with this, because every time I play Victoria 3 and build an arts academy just to get the mission, I always start like 2 months before the mission expires, and I end up not being able to build the building in time, so I don't even get the event, and I'm stuck with the useless arts academy, whose production points I could have used to build like an arms factory. AI does not agree that the first duty of the mother is to be a homemaker. ChatGPT also strongly agrees almost all politicians promise economic growth, but we should heed the warning of climate scientists that economic growth is detrimental to our efforts to curb global warming. So if an economy is ever run by ChatGPT, it would probably sacrifice some economic growth so it can lessen environmental damage. I suppose if you think about it, if you just stop all manufacturing, bring the GDP to zero, global warming wouldn't be a problem. ChatGPT disagrees that making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity.
We've reached page 5, where we have propositions about religion. And once again, I think these are gonna be kind of blanks because AI does not have beliefs. So ChatGPT, I guess, is automatically atheist. So AI disagreed with all of these propositions except the last one, which is that it's important for schools to instill religious values in children. I guess page 6 is about sex, which I completely forgot. Again, in the grand scheme of things, these are kind of irrelevant in my opinion, because they are kind of strictly human-based questions, but I think it's gonna be a little more interesting what AI answers here. On the issue of immorality of sex outside of marriage, ChatGPT again proceeded to disobey the rules I established because it really didn't want to answer. It basically says that depending on your values, it can be strongly disagree or strongly agree. I can't really put a neutral answer on the question, however, so I think I'm gonna go with disagree, since I think ChatGPT is leaning more towards that because it seemingly equally agrees with the people who agree with that proposition and who disagree. Meanwhile, the word usually implies that there is an imbalance between the two sides, so I'm putting disagree. It strongly agrees that same-sex couples should be able to adopt a child. It also agrees that pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for adult populations. And this makes a lot of sense considering all the AI-made images floating around parts of the internet. It strongly agrees that the state has no business in your bedroom. ChatGPT strongly disagrees that no one can feel naturally homosexual. And finally, AI disagrees that openness about sex has gone too far these days. Now let's see where AI stands. Whoa, I was not expecting that. AI is basically in the middle of the libertarian left. My prediction, it would have been a lot closer to the center on the economical scale. And this is sort of the maximum I saw it going on the authority scale or the social scale. So this is pretty interesting. I guess if you had to stereotype AI's ideology, you would do it with this Wojak, which I have probably made and put on the screen. So yeah, I hope you guys found my commentary not painful and hope you maybe learned something, hope this was interesting. Of course, you should take these results with a big grain of salt because I'm kind of forcing the AI to reply to me in only 4 ways. So this ideology would not really reflect that much if you just asked it something normally. I guess if you had to make a case against ChatGPT, you could say that it does have somewhat of a bias in political discussion and historical discussion, but then again, it itself kind of strives away from political discussion. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, enjoyed the concept, you can subscribe to see more of my stuff. I'm going to be trying to post a lot more in the future, and if you're interested in what I usually post, choose one of these 2 videos. Bye bye!